I am ready to bring on our guest tonight. None other than, I wish I had a nickname for him, like the English Hammer or something, but I don't have anything like that. Somebody make up a nickname really quick for him. Very warm welcome to Mr. Dan Barstow. Thanks for being here. Everybody clapping.
Evening, everybody. I'm a bit nervous now. You picked me up like sometimes. I'm a bit. Yeah. It's worse than being on a pitch. This.
That's what everybody says. They're like, "Wow, Keely, like this is. I'm really intimidated by this." But come on, I mean, we're all just sitting around as friends, talking. You know, sure, it's on the internet. It'll be there forever, but don't worry about it. I feel like it's just like umpiring. You go out there knowing that you're going to make mistakes, but you just go out there and do your best because you know you're having fun with your friends and doing great stuff for hockey. So there you go.
Yeah.
So chill, and spike that tee if you have to. Like whatever you have to do. How are you doing this evening?
I'm really good. Yeah. This been a good week. So yeah, you're not too busy. So yeah, pretty happy and things are really good.
Yeah. So Dan, you're a teacher, right? Are you back to school this week? Have you been able to get back into the classroom? Or is that next week?
Children come back next weekend, so we've all been open for a while, but most of the kids have been at home learning online. So yeah, I've just got used to teaching in the Zoom world and being online all day.
Right.
But yeah, I'm looking forward to having all children back next week. So yeah, it'd be good to get everybody back and see how everybody is.
And what age group are you teaching?
I'm year 6, so 10, 11-year-olds. I mean,
Okay. Year 6. I'm trying to think if that accords to our grades, but I don't think so. I think year 6 is like not our grade 6. I think it's after our grade 6. But.
Yeah, it's final year of primary school over here, so it's kind of a big year for their exams. And although this year they've got out of it, so.
Absolutely. And do you teach specific subjects in there? Or are you like a general?
Everything. So I teach, general. So I teach all subjects. So good wide range of English and maths. Although, as people pick up, my grammar's not always best. But yeah, I'm head of sport as well. So my overall responsibility is for running sport in primary in our school as well.
Oh, cool! I didn't know that. So does that mean that you teach hockey over there too? Is
We
that part
do,
of the
but
sport?
we're a really tiny school, so we've only got 200 kids, and we don't really have a big field or any astroturf, so we just make use of what we can. Back to the old days on concrete.
Fun. That sounds very like Calgary, like just whatever you can play on, you're out there. That's awesome. There are a ton of teachers in umpiring. I find like there's a ton of teachers and lawyers, and there's a few cops, particularly one that we're going to be seeing joining you on the pitch in several minutes when we go into your game and things like that. Is there anything about teaching in particular that you think really kind of lends itself to umpiring? Are there any skills, a particular overlap, or things that you learned in umpiring? Because you started umpiring early, and we'll talk about that in a sec. But any skills from umpiring that transfer really onto teaching and vice versa?
Yeah, I definitely think like the communication side of it, and you work in a classroom, you see different children all the time, so knowing how to deal with individuals on a different level, particularly around each one of them got their own personality, and they all respond very differently to you. So the communication level, being understanding like how you can be nice sometimes and you need to put your foot down the other times and build that rapport with them. That's all part of a transferable skill. And again, I suppose in the classroom, you learn how to be really clear and concise sometimes with some of your instructions, and that probably transfers into the umpiring world.
Right. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I haven't had any experience teaching other than teaching umpiring, and I find that it's something that even though I'm supposed to be the teacher, I find I'm just doing more of the learning at the time. Like it's just it's crazy how much it's actually giving back to me because I'm realizing as I go all the things that I should be adjusting and better ways I can get my point across or that sort of thing. So it's kind of like umpiring that way, where you're out there and you're more learning about the game as you're shaping it, right?
Yeah, one of the other things is with classroom, we plan our lessons and all the time, but you make mistakes all the time planning lessons. It's probably the same on the pitch. As much as you go in with a plan or you have something set up of how you want to approach the game, you realize that something's not working, and the skill of the teacher is being able to switch that and restart and rejig and really think on the spot. And I suppose that's a key skill that an umpire needs when they're on the field.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's get into your background a bit. I know there's going to be a lot of people on the broadcast who know you quite well and know your background, but there are going to be some people that you're new to. So take us back back into time when you first started into hockey, because hockey's in your family, right? How did
It is,
you get into it, and whose fault is it? Who got you in?
yeah. Definitely
Who are
my
we
mum.
blaming?
Yeah, no, I didn't really have a choice really. From about birth, pretty much, I was transported around England from pitch to pitch for women's national league games. My mum was a player. She then went on to coach and manage at Bradford Hockey Club, as it was at the time in England.
Right.
And pretty much as soon as I could, stand up was pretty much the moment that I got taken in the car every weekend to a hockey pitch. So my mum was largely responsible. My dad didn't really have a choice with it. He just followed along as he went along.
That sounds like Beth.
Yeah, pretty much. So my mum's been quite influential in that, and I sort of developed through there. So I was a player for a long time, and maybe touch on that a little bit later. And then so I picked up a whistle about 10. So I was playing under 11s hockey, and I had been the type of person I am at the time. I thought I knew it all. So I was the typical umpire who would get stuck into fellow colleagues and I think picking up my first yellow card for verbally abusing umpires at under 11. So somebody said, "Well, why don't you pick up a whistle?" So I picked up the whistle under 11's game, and it was actually my dad who stood behind me, and he didn't know anything about hockey. He just said, "All right, if you're going to do it, I'll stand behind you over the shoulder with a whistle, and if I need to interrupt, I will do." He didn't know the rules, so I don't know if he was ever going to interrupt when he got to it. But yeah, I just learned from there, from picking up from 10 and umpiring. I was playing and umpiring at the same time, and then sort of progressed through the junior ranks with England hockey. And I owe a lot to the young umpire program really that we had in England, because at the time there was a Millennium Youth Games that was running in year 2000, and I was about 11, 12 at the time, and they said we were looking for umpires, and they applied, and basically they turned around and said that you can't do it because you're not old enough to get what we now call our criminal record check for working with young children. And it was actually Jane Knockhold, who worked for England Hockey, who sort of bypassed that system and just said, "Look, come along, I'll look after, chaperone you." And that sort of got me into the tournament side of it, and the young umpire program. It sort of progressed through there really. So yeah, started off at a really young age. I didn't really have a choice. Mum heavily involved. My mum's still involved with doing the ball patrol for the international stuff for England hockey. So yeah, we're massively a hockey family. And one of the advantages was probably that my mum and dad were so into international hockey, was that from really young age, I think the first one I went to Barcelona Olympics at age 4, spent pretty much the whole time watching the hockey there. And my family have always just taken me to international hockey as we've gone through. So I've sort of progressed knowing both the domestic side and the international side, and going to big tournaments and big events on a regular occasion.
Yeah.
That's just what life has been.
That's amazing. I didn't even know all of that, and especially you starting that early. Like, that is fantastic. Do you think that had a big impact on how much confidence you felt as you came through, that it just always felt very natural, instead of, some of us who pick up a whistle later in life? Like, I was 17 when I started, so maybe when you start a little bit later, you get that sort of you sense an otherness with umpires, that, oh, that's not the kind of thing that I do. That's what other people do. But you always did it. Do you think that affected your confidence at all?
I don't. I've never really thought about it that way, but I would say I can't really say for definite, because as a younger, when I was looking at international tournaments really young, I never really focused on the umpires. It wasn't really a big thing, but I'd probably say that unconsciously, I probably did see the aspects. I did pick up things from them, and certainly personalities and the way that people were doing it at the time. That it sort of probably did influence me when I was really young, and I picked up some traits from there, and that probably helped develop. And I suppose the exposure to the highest levels of the game domestically at a very young age just showed I had a good reading and understanding the game very early on. Yeah. Just because I was seeing it perform at the very top level.
Yeah, absolutely. That's fantastic. I'm amazed. There's just comments coming through on the chat where people are worried about. So Simon Milford's my chief pedant in my little FHumpires club here, and he's now worried that you might usurp him. But Mark Cummings stepping in, saying that he's probably safe in that and all that. But Raj, he's laying into you here. He's now now we know why your knowledge of rules is poor. I don't know if that's because you learned them at such a young age, or because it came from. I'm sure hope he's not blaming your mom, because Bev's fantastic. And I remember when I went over. So it was 2006 when I first went over, and I was based up north, so I was fairly close to you. I don't know if you're still like really adjunct in the same area. I imagine you haven't moved too far from the north, because you're a good northern guy, right?
Northern through.
There you go, exactly. And I think I met you guys in a hot minute. It was just like pretty much as soon as I met Gavin Featherstone, I met you guys, and you were like northern hockey for me. And you know, Bev was just such a powerful force in, you know, getting everybody organized and making sure things got done. And she was somebody that I really held in very high esteem right from the start. So I really enjoyed meeting her and everything I learned from her. And then, you know, being able to hang out with you and all that was great. And yeah, Northern Club. I know I don't sound like it, but I really am.
I think I gave you a bit of stick as a player as well.
Exactly. So let's talk about that. You alluded to playing and how much you played before. So how were you able to balance playing and umpiring as you were growing up and coming through that young umpiring system? And when did you have to start making choices about when you were going to do one or the other?
Yeah, when I was young, I was pretty adamant. I really wanted to play, and I really wanted to make it as a player. And I enjoyed playing far more than umpiring, really, to start with. But I was going places on the umpiring scene, so it sort of became natural that there was a door that was open for me to travel internationally and be involved with the international setup young. That sort of had an impact. But I tried to balance most of them until I'd say roughly about when I was about 25, 26. So I was really trying my desperate to stay inside the playing area, because I felt it had a big impact on my umpiring. The more I was staying in touch with what was going on, picking up the new tricks that were coming in terms of skills and what players were trying, and moving with the tactics, I thought it really had an influence on me, my understanding of the game, and my expectations, and sort of anticipating what was going to come next. The push came really when I was doing long distances on a weekend to London on a regular basis with umpiring, which from me in the north is a good 3.5 hours down on drive and a 3.5 hours back. So to play on a Saturday or then umpire on a Sunday, it did put a lot of pressure on the weekend, and with a full-time job and all the planning and the preparation that needed to in the weekend, it became really difficult, especially with family as well. And when we started to think about having a young family, it sort of came to push the shove that one of them had to go. And the umpiring one was going to be the most successful. It was the pattern I was going to go down, and the one I was going places. So it came to a point where I kind of had to make that decision from a family point of view and a work point of view.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is really interesting, because the more umpires I talk to in this setting, and getting to know your background so in depth like this, and being able to share that with the listeners, is that I think there's a big conception out there that from players and coaches that umpires aren't players. You know, they just can't be players. Like, no, they don't understand the game because they're umpires. And the more I talk to everybody, and it doesn't mean that you have to have been a player in order to be a great umpire, but there's a ton of really good umpires who still are very good players, or have spent a lot of really hardcore time, you know, training as players. And I don't know about you, but I still think of myself, I kind of have a split personality where I do have half of my brain that thinks like a player. And the umpiring side's pretty strong, but you know, we are, I think, still a lot of us very much players. And it's about us accessing that and maybe convincing players more that, hey, we're actually a lot more the same than we are different, right?
Yeah, so there's that vision. A lot of players, because they see umpires who are either typically older or at an age where they would expect them to be playing, and they differentiate between the guy who stood in with a whistle in his hand rather than the person who's got the stick, and they don't often see that person who's got the stick in the hand. I was quite lucky that I came along the program pretty much with the players who were the same age as me. So when I was going through like under 16s, I was doing international under 16. So I was always the same sort of age and thing. So I got to know a lot of the players really well. And also with me playing in quite high level in National League and university stuff, I was playing against the same guys who I was umpiring later. So there was automatically a bit of rapport that was built there, because we kind of knew each other with that. But I really think that we need to really focus that just because someone hasn't umpired doesn't necessarily mean they don't have the skills and the trade. I do think there's benefits from playing, that you get a natural feel for the game that maybe someone who's played doesn't quite get that feel about what the players are trying where and when's the change in tempo and why is that happening. Which is harder to pick up. But there's some people who've never played the game who are very successful at that because they've learned it. They managed to pick up on the skill through the experience.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's something to be said too, that even umpires who haven't played, we all get involved in the game on so many levels. So there are very, very few people that only perform one role. You know, we're often volunteers in other respects. We're administrators. We coach. We look after kids, we're contributing to our clubs, whatever the case might be, just like every other hockey person. We do everything, like all of us do everything. And I think that's something that we really can acknowledge and rest our hat on. And like you said, I agree that umpires who haven't done a lot of playing or haven't done any, still, it's just a matter of training and practice and repetition and
the one thing that I get picked up on all the time from players is they always get that idea of what preparation have umpires done before the game, because they don't necessarily see umpires at training sessions, so umpires are not always going down to their training. And you say, well, they don't see everything that's gone into the process. They don't see the amount of work that goes on, and they don't recognise that for us sometimes the matches that we're umpiring on a weekend, that is our training ground. So for them to be able to see what we're trying things out in those games and stuff like that, they don't always see that. So there's a bit of work there to be done with the players for them to understand what goes into it and the amount of effort that's gone into part by the umpires. So it's the same as what the players are doing. Yeah,
absolutely. I was hosting a clubhouse room just a couple of days ago, yesterday, I don't know. It's COVID time, and it's a room to bring coaches and players together talking with umpires about rules. And one of the things one of the coaches said was, I think it would be really great if umpires could, shouldn't they just meet before a game and try to get on the same page and have a conversation about what they're going to do and how they're going to interpret rules? And I'm like, we do that. We really do that, especially at higher levels. That's the thing. And he's like, what? I had no... And this coach has been around. It's not like he's a newbie, and he should have been at levels where umpires are doing pregame talks. And I think it's just an issue of attention and knowledge, because we tend to do it, off on the side, or we do it in the car park or the clubhouse, or we might even do it on a Zoom call or, on a phone call earlier in the week or something like that. But we're still putting that time in. But we're so invisible that they don't even seem to know that, we're doing things like that. But there's also all of our physical preparation, our video analysis work and things like that they're just, pretty oblivious to. So it's cute. I think it's very cute. That they don't know. I have a question here from Raj, which segs really nicely into the next topic. He wants to know who was the one individual who encouraged you to take up umpiring full time, apart from your parents.
I don't really know. I think I remember very early on that Chris Todd, who sadly has passed away now, but was big influential part in North umpiring. As soon as he saw me, even this is back at under 11s, he almost walked up to me, and he had his big FIH badge jacket on, as he used to do back then, the big green and dark jacket. And this was just under 11s tournament, but he walked up to me and he said, "Look, you're going to go places if you carry on." And that was a big sort of statement, big push to say, "Look, one day you'll wear that jacket." And I might not wear that jacket because I don't like it; it's not my taste. But that was very influential in going forward. I must admit, there were a lot of people along the line who tried to encourage me to stop playing and take up umpiring full time, but I was always quite resistant to that. But
I remember those days, because I remember when I was umpiring Durham and you were on the team, and I remember all those tensions. And you were a lot of fun to umpire, by the way. I really enjoyed that. But and I remember you going through the battles and having to balance and make decisions, and that's really tough. But so your first international experience, were you 16 at that point, or was it even earlier than that? Because you were talking about doing under 16 events.
Yeah, I'm going to say off the top of my head, I think I was about 16 when I went to first under 16s, and then it was influential from there. And then I think I moved on to the senior side around about 20.
Okay. Do you remember that first tournament, that under 16 event?
Bits of it, yeah.
I'm sure I couldn't. I wouldn't even remember I'd gone to one. So that's pretty impressive. How about we focus on so as your career is going along and you're just moving and also into the international events. Your first senior event. Do you remember what that was? Was it a tour or was it a proper appointed?
Proper appointed it was.
Yeah.
Um, I got on the FH badge from under 21 tournament, and it sort of progressed from there really. Senior ones straight away. I think off the top of my head, it was a Four Nations tournament.
Yeah.
It's not one that stuck straight in my memory, I must admit, but it's a big step up. And I remember stepping into adult game originally and realizing that somebody who was quite young and a lot younger than many of the players who've been playing on the scene for a good 10, 12 years. There were a couple of moments where I was a bit starstruck when you see certain internationals that you know for a while. You've watched yourself, you've been to games, you've paid the money to you get a little bit starstruck in terms of that. So you do get that idea.
Yeah.
But I've learned really quite quickly on the National League that it took me a while in England to get used to those big influential players. We had players like James Tyndall who were quite vocal and other players who were around the old Canuck base who were willing to test me.
Yeah.
And I had to learn really quickly as a youngster against those experienced players that I was here, then I had to stick up for myself pretty much as quick as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. So
so
I want to follow up on that a little bit because I've been talking to quite a few young umpires recently. I've got members of FHU 3T Yellow. I've got 16, 17-year-olds, 21-year-olds, and a lot of them talk about that experience and at being at that age and then umpiring players who are quite a bit older than them and feeling intimidated. Were there any specific things that really worked for you in managing the James Tyndalls and those sort of guys, or was it just sort of a general hit and miss? You just got used to it.
Being honest, it probably took me a good 2 years from getting on the sort of high levels of the domestic league, the Premier, to really finding my feet with it, and really moving from a step to sort of progress from there. And I think it only works because those sort of players are influential, that they're going to try it until they realize that you're not going to take any rubbish anymore, or you're the one who's going to make the first move.
Yeah.
So I think the big step for me really was being myself, really sticking to my own guns, using every tool that I had already in terms of my management of the game, and getting those cards in or those warnings in where necessary, and not letting them rule the game, me rule the game. So winning every single battle in the communication and making sure that they walked away not thinking they'd had the last word was a really important one. But also, one of the biggest things that I found that really worked for me was being confident enough after the game to go up to them, communicate with them, talk to them. So they understood a little bit about me. And also they understood a little bit that I'll hold my hand up sometimes and say, yeah, but I've made an honest mistake. Probably got that one wrong. But also at the same time saying, I don't agree with you on that. You're not gonna have that. You're saying that one.
Yeah, absolutely.
Confidence is a massive part of it.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. And that's come up over and over again with all the umpires that we've talked to. From if Tomo's still on, he talked about it. Kernsey talked about it. Celine talked about it. Jakub talked about it. I mean, everybody has come on and said it's really important to be able to have those conversations with players and to have that confidence. And I remember that was a big culture shock for me when I came over first in 2006. That I remember sitting around at the Durham the Durham student rooms or whatever in the mess hall and sitting there amongst all the players and going, oh my God, I don't even know why I'm here. And this is crazy. And, Gavin's giving me an earful in one end and I've got a couple, captains chiming in and from the 3 games I did that day. And I remember it felt overwhelming, but at the same time, it was really exciting because again, the stuff you can learn in that kind of setting from that feedback is just golden. And it doesn't mean that they're right, but just knowing what they're thinking and how they perceive what you were doing and what you had seen from that and what you would thought what the best option was, just being able to compare those things, I found was just incredibly useful. So that was something that I picked up from the English structure and brought back home to Canada and have been really working hard to implement. So, thanks Northern people for that.
I think it's a really important one because when we go through the process, I think if we look at certain sports where referees and officials are so distanced from the players as soon as the game ends, or they don't get those opportunities to interact and such. I think it's so important that we build rapport with the players and with the management, and they understand us and we understand them. And one of the key things is learning that everybody has their say as an umpire. It doesn't matter who it is, somebody's got an opinion. And somebody wants you to do something differently. And 95% times out of the time, they're wrong. And 5% they'll be right. But I think it's understanding as an umpire that those 5% when they're right, and you can pick and choose off everybody what you think works and what you can learn from it. And I think that's a really important thing, is filtering out the rubbish, but working out what's best.
Yeah, absolutely. That ties in a little bit with this question from Jane. So that's probably one big piece of advice you would give to an umpire. But Jane's asking if there's something other than that. If there's one thing that you would want to pass on to umpires right at this moment, everything that you've learned up to this point in career, what is that one piece of advice you would give?
I think it would be about how you approach it. So how you approach not just the games, but your whole attitude towards your learning around the umpiring. So how you look at your games, how you analyze them, how you talk to people, how you approach the fact that each game is a new learning curve. I think we can too often go saying we want to put our best performance in on every single game. And that's how we want it. But if you do that, you're only ever going to stick to what you know and what works best for you without trying out new things. And one of the big learning curves from things you do is you've got to stick with some learning practices. You've got to try specific line things like positioning or whistle tone or whatever it is. If you don't try those things in matches, they never become sort of habitualized into your way of umpiring. And seeing every single game as some sort of learning curve to try something out or do something differently. And that's the best way I can say it, is rather than trying to be the best all the time, think about what you can learn each game. And go over a plan for each game about what you are going to try.
Mm-hmm. That's amazing. I love that. Bing. I wish I had like an air horn and I could be like, boo, 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 celebrating that. Because that is such an important point. And it's one of those things. So in doing all the umpiring education I'm doing these days, I'm really trying to shift away from this notion that there's a right way and a wrong way to do something. And this comes from listening to coaches and players and how they go through their process of building their performance journeys, that it's not about there's a correct press and an incorrect press, or there's a correct hit and an incorrect hit. There's different techniques to achieve a result. And as long as you're doing what is best and what works for the game as it is in that moment and the people that you have in that moment, that if you're using the best skills that get you the result, then that's perfect. But that means you have to try new skills and you have to practice, and sometimes you have to fail with them. And yeah, if we could approach more things like our positioning, our whistle timing, our whistle techniques, things like that as skills rather than a bang, it's a black or white, right or wrong, I think we would really grow a lot more quickly as a community.
Yeah, the way I see it is kind of like you've got a big toolbox, and the more things you try and the more things you work out that work or don't work, and it might not work in some scenario, but you may store that in your toolbox or whatever, and next time you get a game, because every game is completely different, you might have something that just pulls out that you might need to use that toolbox again, or that skill that you've stored in there. So the bigger that toolbox is, the more you are able to adapt to every single game that's going to happen, the scenario that might take place, and you've got those little skills there for you available. Yeah,
absolutely. Another question from Raj. He's full of the good ones today, that's for sure. He's asking if you find players are more vocal at the national level than at international, or the same. And as a result of that, do you change your management style to adapt?
Yes, I do find them more vocal at national level, but also I do change my management style, particularly for national and international. And it's not to do with the fact that I know the players more. It's just the way that I feel like the communication is a lot easier. So national, I know that players, they know me a little bit better or see me more regularly. So they're more open to come and approach me. And I also know that I know every single player inside out to some extent. So I know that when I can have those conversations and when the moment to stop those conversations is. So yeah, I do think that they're more vocal. Because they get used to you, so they understand your traits. So they know when something's not quite right or something's different to them. Whereas on the international scene, you don't see everybody all the time. Yes, you build rapport with certain key players, but there's always individuals you don't know. Yeah. And also you've got that language barrier where there's certain teams where they don't speak English. So you have to be careful not to open and engage with one team, particularly more than another. with it. So the whistle tone is much more important, and your body language and the way you're doing internationally. And also the game's going so much quicker internationally that you don't have that time to always open and engage in those conversations or use those other skills.
Yeah, that's very true as well. When Jakob was on a few weeks ago, he was talking about one of his favorite parts of being able to get back onto the pitch a few weeks ago was that he actually got to talk to the players and coaches again and say hi and have that communication rapport again. And he definitely comes across as somebody who actively seeks out those relationships. Is that something that you're doing at the international level as well? Or would you describe yourself as a little more reserved in that and you kind of let those things happen more organically?
Yeah, I'm a little bit more reserved on that front. I think there's a point where you can overpush it. And I don't mean that in terms of Jakob, but I mean there's a point where you can overforce relationships with certain players. And I think sometimes on the international scene, it's more of you build a rapport through your experience, your brand in many ways because they know you. So the top players will get used to you over time because they see you in the big games. They know how you're going to work. But at the same time, you do sometimes go and approach certain players at certain points where you think there's a good conversation to have, particularly if they're very influential. So somebody like Verger in the Dutch team who can play very much on the limit, having those moments and build those rapport with somebody like that who you might deal with a little bit more frequently than others, in terms of having to manage them through the game. That's somebody we might really approach and have those conversations with and try to build that rapport with. But I think it comes more naturally through the experience they recognize you've got and where they see you or what games you're doing, really.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that I hope that people who are listening at home are taking this in and transferring it, because this isn't just what you would only do at the top levels. I think you have those opportunities and those same reasons to build that rapport at every division, every level that you're umpiring at, because there are influential players on every team who you can use to get your message across, to kind of develop an ally almost and be like, hey, I need your help here. Like, let's get on side with this. Can you look after that guy for me? And whether it's a captain or just another leader on the pitch. And that can be a very effective management tool no matter where you're umpiring, for sure. And that's part of getting to know your level, your people at your league. And like you said, developing your brand almost. I really like that term. That's awesome. So I guess I'd love to go into, I'd love to talk about every single tournament you've ever been at and things like that. But I thought, you've been around a while. What's your cap count at this point? I should have looked it up before the...
Quite low, I think. I think it might be in about 54, 55. I don't really pay attention, but yeah, internationally, I think senior side, I'm only at 54 or 55, I think.
Well, that's because you're only like 23 years old. So, that makes sense.
A bit older than that, but go on. I'll take
that. Absolutely. What is there any tournament that you've been to that maybe was one that really stuck out in your mind that was unusual and really special because it wasn't, even though it wasn't the biggest tournament, it was just like a really remarkable experience for you? Was there anything like that?
Yeah, there's a few. I think Commonwealth Games for me was massive. It was sort of like a big breakthrough tournament. I didn't go in there expecting to be very at the top level. I was really young at the time. It was Glasgow, and
Glasgow, yeah.
There were some big names there. So we had like people like Madden, Kenzie, Peter Wright was there. So there were some big guys there, and it's sort of one that really was sort of like a breakout moment for me. It wasn't the biggest in terms of international hockey because we know that the Commonwealth is not huge in terms of the massive teams we've got there. Yes, we've got 4 or 5 big teams in terms of international, but it's not seen as the biggest tournament in the world. But for me, I went in there really young, not expecting too much, and then I came out with a final. And just being on that scene of such a major event, not just that there was hockey there, but everything else was there. Yeah. All the other sports were there, and being in that atmosphere was a really like momentum change for me, and sort of pushed me to where I wanted to go, really.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome. We were talking in our prep meeting a little bit about a tournament in China that you went to, and that it was a really crazy experience. So Tell us a little about that. And I know that I don't want you to be telling tales out of school, obviously, but especially a place like China, we hear about it, but we really have no idea what it would be like to go there. So what can you tell us about what it was like to umpire there?
Yeah, so me and Martin received a request from FIH. We were sort of quite young together, coming through at the same time, and they asked us to. They needed a couple of neutrals to go out there to do their Chinese state games. It was a qualification for the China games, and we really didn't know what to expect. We've heard a few people had been before to China for sort of the state or the games sort of situation, and they've really enjoyed it. So we kind of went unknowing, like not knowing anything about it or what it was going to be like when we got there. So it was just sort of an unknown for us. And it was a bit of an eye opener when we arrived because I think we went into the first meeting and obviously our language in English and all the umpires were really talking in Chinese.
Yeah.
So sitting in some briefings that were taking place in Chinese and then having to have a translator sat next to us trying to explain with it. And especially when they wanted to feed off us as a neutral to try and learn and develop what they were doing in their skills, because they were all sort of young and up-and-coming Chinese umpires who had some internationals in terms of people like Chen Dekan who'd been to the Olympics. But really, they were trying to learn from us. So having to work through translators was a really difficult one.
Yeah.
And then sitting in that first briefing, as you do before the start of the tournament, and then picking up on the fact that although it was communicated in Chinese to everybody, that everybody would have to hand in their mobile phones and they wouldn't get them back until the end of the tournament. We were like, what's going on here? This is a strange one. And then we were kind of told that all the Chinese umpires would get their appointments by phone at 6 a.m. in the morning. So they'd find out at 6 a.m. and the first game would be at 7. So bear in mind, you get an hour notice that you were potentially on the first game and you had to be on that starting at 7. Whereas we'd get all our appointments by paper the night before. So me and Martin knew exactly what we were doing and where we were going, but the other Chinese officials were not getting that. There were a number of reasons for that, because I think that a lot of the umpires were sort of employed by teams within in who were in the game. So they were worried about sort of other influences that were going on.
Right.
But so it was really strange setting, and it was sort of in the first few years after video umpire had sort of been influenced, so they wanted to use it. So they had like static cameras and a video umpire in the box, and we were umpiring games with a translator who was sat at the side of the pitch. So when we needed a video umpire call and the teams asked for it, the translator with his walkie-talkie would run onto the pitch, and we'd have to communicate through the walkie-talkie. So yeah, that was a strange one, and then you'd have to wait for your decision to come back through the the interpreter.
Wow.
So yeah, it was a bit of a different world, and also there were things like games finished. If a team got 10 goals ahead, then the game's finished then. So some games finished before half time, and it was sort of all the build up to one last game, which was like the 4th v 5th. So me and Martin were on the 4th v 5th game at the end of the tournament. And we always talk about umpires wanting the final, but really the 4th, 5th game in this tournament was the most important because it was the final place for the qualification for China State Games.
Right.
So yeah, it was just a different world. But I must admit, they treated us really, really well. It was a fantastic experience, and one I think we both really wanted to go back to if we ever got the opportunity, just because we were so well treated.
Yeah. Oh, that's amazing. That's a really good point as well, that that there are tournaments where it doesn't look like it's the marquee game on paper, but it could be the game that decides who goes into the semifinal, or that third, fourth game is the one who decides who qualifies for the next level event. And we, internationally, you have a lot of tournaments like that, like in the Pan Am region. I like to say that I've proudly not done very many finals, because I've done more of the 3-4 games that were. That's not the excuse, but yes, sometimes understanding that those games can be just as critical or more critical than, maybe the gold medal game that you think has all the prestige, and that you're still bringing your absolute best, for all those games is really important. Let's talk about, let's go back a little bit to the structure of umpiring in England, because we've had a couple questions come through about that, because you started out and you went through the young umpire ranks and did this whole development pathway, but there's lots of different ways to get into umpiring. And Ollie Nevin here, he or she asked, is there potential for anyone who's now in their 30s to progress in England hockey umpiring, or do you need to be someone who started a lot younger? Asking for a friend. So, what do you have to say for that?
Yes, there's always opportunities. Age it's a difficult one because internationally it takes time for you to be able to develop and to get the experience that you need to travel through the levels up to where you need. So age is always a difficult one, but I think when you're in your 30s, you've still got plenty of time. It depends what your idea of what you want out of it and what you want from your umpiring. I think if you're talking around getting towards the Olympics or the World Cup, you've got to be fast tracking really quickly if that's going to be something that there's an option for where you want to be. But in reality, it really depends. To get to the top level in England, by all means, it's well within grasp and comfortable. To get on the international scene, yes, but really, it's all about trying to get the young talent to be pushed through as much as possible on the international scene at the moment for those who are going to be at the top level at a certain age.
Yeah,
if that's an honest answer.
No, I think it is, and that's something that I think I've been answering this question a few times recently, lately as well, and I think one thing that people who aren't in umpiring very in depth the way that we are obsessed with it, that they don't know that there's a mandatory retirement age at the FAH of 47. So it sounds arbitrary and crazy, and it is, but there's a reason for it, and I get it. But the calendar year in which you turn 47, that has to be the last year that you accept appointments. This COVID time is going to be very different for quite a few people. But because of that, that means, like you said, it takes time to develop, to get the experience and the repetitions that you need, the failures that you got to get out of your system in order to get good. And I know that I didn't start international umpiring until I was 30. And that was really quite late. And I didn't accept that, and I didn't like that answer. And I was like, "Oh, you guys are assholes. You're jerks. I can do anything." And it wasn't until I got to that point, and I looked back and I go, "Yeah, I really wish I had started a lot sooner," just because that's where my ambitions were. But like you said, if you don't have expectations, and you're just there to get the most out of the experience and enjoy whatever can come, then I think, start wherever you can. Just don't expect that you're going to be perhaps an Olympic gold medal final.
And I think certainly for England side, we've had a few in the last 10, 15 years, we've had a few players who've retired in their 30s or carried on playing but have decided they want to move on to the umpiring scene, and they've been really successful. So we get people like Dave Dowdle, who went on to be international and went to quite major tournaments, who's now kind of retired, but he got really successful in the international scene. But I think it's such a long journey, and everything would have to go perfect for somebody in the 30s, I think, to it. And I think when you get to international, there's going to be setbacks. There's always the odd tournament where it doesn't go quite to plan, or you need to really pick up from there and learn your experiences from, and that's one of the way to go.
Yeah.
There's a lot of competition out there on the international scene.
Yep. Very, very true. Very true. Baz is a little late to the party, but here he is saying,
I wondered where he was.
I know, right? I mean, we did our whole up the north thing earlier, and then he's rocking in like he made it up, but there you go. You're very welcome.
Just like he's come now to drop a bomb.
Oh, he's saving up. Don't worry. It'll be coming. There you go. Let's see. Phil Stubley. Hi, Dan. Big fan. Do you miss not playing down at Wakey's as a result of committing to umpiring?
I miss the playing side of it. I must admit, I miss playing, but I think it would be realistic that it's just not possible in terms of time commitment at the moment. Hopefully, when the little one who's 2 now grows up a little bit and he can be on the pitch, then I might come down and play for a bit of fun.
You'll be the one shoving him in the car and taking him around when he's 4 years old, and he'll be picking up the whistle when he's 8, and doing all that, which is that's awesome. So before we move on to the game and the clips, let's see how we're doing for time. Yeah, standard. It's almost been an hour. This is the way that we do it. I was hoping that you could touch on a few things. Like you talked about Glasgow being your one of your favorite tournaments because you really felt like you stepping on a big stage and you had a fantastic tournament and there were lots of big names there and you know, it's a bit close to home and all that sort of thing. So maybe that was one of your highlights. I'm sure the tournament we're about to talk about is going to be one of your highlights as well, because, I mean, let's face it, it was the World Cup and you had a fantastic tournament. So we'll get into that in a sec. But what's been your biggest disappointment so far in your umpiring career? How did we handle it? We know what we're going to talk about now, but let's let the people at home hear it, because we know, and the reason I wanted to make sure we talked about this is that everybody at home has faced a lot of disappointments in umpiring, and this is the more standard state of affairs. Things don't usually come to us really easily. So let's talk about this. Big disappointments, and how did we handle them?
Yeah, so I think before we get onto obviously what you want to talk about in terms of the Olympics or whatever, but I think my biggest disappointment has been the Europeans. I've only been to Europeans once, and I went quite young, so it would have been 10, 12 years ago now. And I didn't get off to the best start as much as I prepared for it. I didn't get off to the best start. And we've talked about for years about how the first game of your tournament is really important to set your scene for the umpire managers, to show them what you're really about, especially if they haven't seen you regularly, or just to really set your stall out, and people see what you like. It's a little bit like a job interview, I almost describe it, where people make decisions really quickly early on in job interviews about what they think about you on your appearance and how you come across. And I think tournament-wise, first 15 minutes of any tournament, people have already made a judgment about how confident you are, how you feel, how you look. And I didn't quite make a crisp start as I could. I think I got a game again. It was something like Germany against Czech Republic or Holland against Czech Republic, and it's always going to be a one-sider. And it didn't quite stick straight away. And I kind of got 4 Czech Republic games in that tournament, 4 under balance. And I think by the second game, me and the Czech goalkeeper had not seen eye to eye. So by the time we got to the 4th game, I think we were at no talking stage, and it was just, you get on with your job and I'll get on with my job. So it was a massive regret, was that tournament, really. It's the one tournament where I really feel like I've gone to and it hasn't come away successful. I haven't done as well as I wanted to show. So that's the one experience I really want to get back stuck into is Europeans, and really prove myself, really, and put that one down as a tournament that's a success rather than one that I regret, really.
Yeah.
But I suppose I learned masses from that. I did learn masses from that, and it's not an experience that you usually get is the same side 4 times. Usually umpire managers try to avoid it, but I think because I wasn't performing at my best, umpire managers were sort of hand-tied to Czech Republic. We're going to struggle, so I was going to get those games.
Yeah, absolutely. I've been there. That sounds very, very familiar. There you go. So let's touch on the other one. We know it's supposed to be the year now that the Tokyo Games are going to proceed, and you didn't get that appointment. And I got to say, I was very disappointed for you as well. But how did you feel when you got that news? And what's the process been like for you to get to where you are now about how you feel and where you're going from here?
Yeah, there's no hiding. I was weirdly, the day that I got the news, I was putting up a display in school, actually, which was all about Tokyo, and it was building up for the year ahead and for the kids. So I don't know how I managed to pick that day to put that one up and got the news. And I didn't actually find out through FIH. I found out the day before through a colleague. So I kind of had the news before I got the letter. Yeah. And yeah, being honest, there were a lot of tears actually for a week, because I'd almost prepared myself to some extent. I'd been talking myself up. I knew that the Olympics appointments were going to come out sometime in the next few months. I knew it was coming, but I didn't know when, and I couldn't predict it. And I'd got myself in a stage where a little bit before the World Cup, I didn't expect the World Cup appointment. But I tried to talk myself around thinking I've done well at the World Cup. I'm not going to put all my eggs in one basket. I'm going to say, look, it's not done until it comes, and I just don't know what's going to happen. So I kind of talked myself into a situation where I felt like I wasn't going to get it as much as I could do. But when I did get the news, yeah, I'm not going to lie, there were a lot of tears that went on for the first few weeks. In fact, probably for a few months as it settled in. And I don't, yeah, it's still a touchy one, but like I can't explain it. The positive side of it was really that there's a lot of competition. And all the guys who were going, I'm good friends with. So it's not, in that instance, it's not anything against that. I think we've got a really good competition on the men's side. Yeah. So there were a lot of influences. And I've not sort of looked for why I'm not going or any reason for it. I don't want to really know particularly. I've kind of approached it with the idea of what am I going to learn now and what am I going to do for the next sort of 3 or 4 years as we build up towards the next one.
Yep.
It was a difficult one because I put everything into that 4-year cycle. And I felt like I'd done really well in that 4 years in the build up to those appointments. And obviously I'd had the World Cup semi-final and I'd done the AHL final in sort of the few months before those appointments were done. So I felt like I tried to do enough, but there's a lot of other things that come with it. Obviously there's geography and the group is limited to a certain number. So I've got to a point now where I'm not dwelling on the fact of why I'm not going or anything like that. It's all about getting my head in the place to really prove myself.
Yeah.
I think the hardest point of it was actually getting the email the 2 days later about going to Olympic qualifiers, and knowing that we were asking to go umpiring straight away, and knowing whether my head would be in the right place for those umpire qualifiers, particularly around people who were going to the Olympics and had got that appointment. Thankfully, that went really well.
Yeah. Which set of matches were you on again?
I did the Pakistan home game, so we had the really tight finish to the first one, and the second one sort of evened itself out. But I was really grateful that I did both of those 2 games, really just to get my head into it and really get stuck into umpiring. And I'm really feeling, because you do feel quite down straight after it, and you do lack a little bit of motivation to start with, and with every setback that's natural. I learned that as a player. When you don't get selected or you don't win the games that you really need to, the crunch games, you do feel down, but you got to pick yourself up. And just the feeling of being in a packed crowd in Holland, and the excitement of those games, it just said to me, look, I haven't got it, so let's move on. Let's get to the next one. Let's move forward.
Yeah, great opportunity just to get back on the horse and do what you love to do best. So that's awesome. I remember that game. That first game was just such an unexpected result. It was just going crazy. So that's something for all of you in FHU 3T Yellow. We're going to do that on a weekend watch party soon, because that'll be a good game. I'd forgotten that was one that we should touch. Let's see. There's a couple questions. Oh, Jamie Cox, really? Who is the best umpire in Yorkshire? Come on.
Hamish. It was Hamish, wasn't it? I think it's still Hamish, isn't
it? There you go. And Simon Begg just wanted to say thanks for the honest and human answer. Absolutely. I love that. So we've covered.
Just to add on to that, I think the good thing that I've got is around me, and I just touched on Hamish there. I think Hamish went through this experience himself. So someone who's really close, I've seen it firsthand. On England side of Hamish, I think he was reserved for 2 Olympics, and he eventually got there to go on the 3rd one. So whatever happens, I'll keep trying, and I'll try to keep my best. And I've seen it happen to him, and it's all about resilience. So, yeah.
There you go. And Raj is cheering you on to learn French for the next one. So there you go. So let's step back a little bit in time, because we're going to go through a few clips from your semifinal match at the 2018 World Cup. Now, this must have been an incredible highlight for you. I mean, we know that this is it should be actually the marquee event. It should be bigger than the Olympics, I think, on the hockey calendar, because it's our championship. It's our World Cup instead of being sort of the IOC's big championship. But anyway, I digress. Tell me about what it was like to go to Bhubaneswar and be a part of this just incredibly huge, elaborate, well-supported event. Tell me everything about that, because I want to know.
Well, obviously it's a highlight. It is a highlight. As umpires, we crave sort of the big experience. We want that atmosphere. We want to see it, and I think it's the closest thing that we'll ever get to hockey of understanding what it might be like for a football referee with 50, 60,000 in the crowd. I think in India we had 16,000. We were maxed out capacity on nearly every evening. And that crowd is loud and noisy. So it is one big, huge event. And I don't think you can ever get yourself prepared for what that sort of experience is like. Mm-hmm. You just kind of feed off it, and you sort of you enjoy the environment while you're in it. Whilst at the same time, 3 weeks that we were there is a really long time, especially if you're in your room for quite a while of it and you're not umpiring regularly all the time and you've got long breaks. That's a difficulty, but for that, it was just an outstanding experience. Everything that went with the Indian setup there, the stadium is incredible. I'd been to India for the couple of years before that as part of, almost as we talk about how much preparation went in. Well, I'd experienced the Indian hockey in terms of I've been to Junior World Cup before that in Lucknow. I'd been to Bhubaneswar for the World League final. So everything had built up to the point where I was used to the Indian setup.
Okay. Yeah.
I knew what to expect, but you could never really expect what was going to happen because they built a new set of stands for that stadium. It got even bigger and better, and the effort they put into it was just amazing in terms of the host. And then once you've got all the very best teams in the world competing at that level, then it's just fantastic.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I do remember that was the debut of that Odisha stadium, and what a big deal that was, and the big opening ceremony and all that sort of thing. But I just want you to lead us through a little bit. Something you touched on was that you were there for 3 weeks. And I think that's something that maybe people at home aren't aware, that there's a period of time, especially before these big first tier events, and I know I went through this a couple times before Junior World Cups, where you arrive quite early, and then as a team you're doing a whole bunch of things together to prepare and get ready for the event. So what was it like there in Bhubaneswar? How early did you get there, and what kind of things did you do in the days leading up to the tournament?
Yeah, it was a really weird one because for me it was 6 weeks after my wife had given birth to our first child, so it was a really quick sort of setup. So hockey was not really on my mind before I arrived, really, to be honest. I'd done a lot of preparation before we knew that we were going to have Oscar our little and taken it. So I'd done a lot of it early on, and in that 6 week period, I really didn't do a lot in terms of focusing on hockey yet either, because I'd already done it and I thought we were ready. So for me, switching on was on the plane. We'd arrived. We were 4 days in advance. I think the hardest thing, particularly with India, is the journey, the travel and the airport and the number of flights you have to get, because with flying into Delhi, there's always a 7-hour wait before you can get your domestic flight. So it's a good 24 hours to get there.
Yeah.
And that's the difficult one. But we arrived 3 or 4 days before. We'd straight into like team building exercises, getting to know each other again. Although we were all knew each other, just getting back to the social, meeting up with everybody, checking how everybody was, going through all that. And then we went through a couple of days of preparation in terms of briefing, although we've done a lot of briefing and we do a lot of communication sort of on Facebook or WhatsApp beforehand. So we've done a lot of video clip analysis. So we kind of gone through them, but we used those 2 days really to sum up what our plan was, particularly around sort of the grey areas that we were still sort of not comfortable with, or any clips that we shared that we hadn't come to a conclusion on or a consensus on. So a lot of it was about preparing that. And then there's obviously going through the protocols. Some people did some practice games. So obviously the teams are out there, so they want other people to help. So that was sort of a personal choice sort of thing, whether people wanted it. I chose to do one half, and I think Martin swapped with me for the other one. So it's just about getting a feel for the stadium and the pitch, just so we get an opportunity to get it, because we don't always get those opportunities, particularly when it's first time on the pitch. For some people as an umpire, you have to feel it. You've got to feel what it feels like. You've got to understand your positioning and where you are. So to understand that, obviously, it never gives you the feel of what it's going to be like with a full crowd in it. So a lot of that was preparation and just team bonding and realizing where we want to go and finding that consensus and grey areas in anywhere that we were unsure about, really.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then the 3 weeks is a really difficult period because although you're going to be sort of either video or on the pitch every sort of 2 days, there's a lot of downtime, and particularly in somewhere like India where you haven't got places you can go out for the day very easily. You can't just switch off and go sightseeing or whatever for all time or see different things. Killing that downtime is really important. So finding a place to do your fitness or your Netflix or whatever you want to do just to kill the time without overanalyzing performances or watching hockey over and over again. And those of you who've been in tournament experiences will know that if you just go to the stadium and you just sit and watch, it can be really tiring.
Yeah.
Just watching hockey over and over again, it can really drain you. So it's really important that you keep yourself nice and fresh as much as possible. So getting yourself in a headspace where you're away from things or you're involved in it. I don't know if I'd say I was lucky or I was unlucky to be to room with Kenzie for the whole 3 weeks.
Unlucky.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry.
But it kind of worked for me because Kenzie has his opinions and whilst he keeps his room a mess, we're both messy. So it kind of worked.
Oh my God, that's hilarious. Yeah, that logic checks out, that you guys would be slobs together. I get that. So leading up to the semifinal match that we're just going to look at a couple clips now from, I watched all the games, and I remember you were having a really good tournament. When did you get the feeling that you're like, hey, this is going well? Like, despite the fact that I just had a baby 6 weeks ago, and holy crap, I'm, now I'm in India, but you must have had a feeling at some point. You're like, yeah, I'm in the groove, because you were really on point in that semifinal. So
I don't, to be honest, I didn't really get a feeling until about midway. And I think those who were sort of communicating with me from home would have known that. The first sort of 3 games, the first game I felt went really well. And then the second game, I got a really important game for Spain. And Spain were really pushing. It was really, I think that they got a draw against the French. I think it was Spain, France. And it was massive in the tournament. I didn't realize it during the game, but it had a massive impact on that group. And Spain we had some big moments, and they were really pushing. And I think I had Kiko running 50 meters of the pitch to talk to me while giving a penalty corner to his team. And it wasn't as crisp as I felt that game as it should have been. So that it just put doubts into my mind and how we react to that. So game 3, I felt really like I really needed to nail it, and I felt like I was under a bit of pressure. And then there was a point where we'd sort of been told that we were going to either get communicated that we were going to get another game, or we were not going to get another game, basically. And we were all sat around waiting for that conversations that we have. And they're important conversations with the umpire managers about where we are and that feeling. You don't want to be on the side where, look, you're not going to get another game. You might be in the video box or whatever, but you're probably not going to be on the pitch, because that's a really difficult time to sit there. And we were sort of sat there filtering, and when they got the message, you could kind of work out that I was either going to get a quarterfinals, a semi-finals, or a final. So I knew that for me, I'd gone into that tournament, I kind of feeling like I was last pick on the list. It just felt like there were other people, when you look down the names, that everybody else was there. And I actually was on when FIH revealed the list of names. It seemed like everything was in alphabetical order, and then it was me at the bottom. So I'm sure that wasn't
for the
intentional.
attitude. Oh my gosh.
No, but sure it wasn't intentional. But when I looked down the list of the names, and I was like, well, these guys have been to World Cups, these guys have been to Olympics before. It felt like I was coming in as number 16. So my target was to go away thinking I've jumped above a few people, and go away sort of thinking I'm in the middle of the pack here. I deserve to be here, and that's how I'm performing.
Yeah.
So to then they sat down and said, look, you're going to have a quarterfinal and a semi-final. I was like, wow, I must have had a good tournament, because to be trusted with those important knockout games was massive.
Yeah.
And then when the quarterfinal matches came out, and we realised that I hadn't got a quarterfinal, there was only one thing that really could be. It could either be a semi-final or a 3-4 game.
Yeah.
And then to be told that I was going to do a 3-4 game was amazing. To do a semi-final was amazing. And then when I looked down the list of semi-finals we had, there was only one I could have done. I think GB were in the other one, so I had to do Holland, Australia. And when you looked at that on paper, that could be a final for any tournament.
Yes.
So we all talk about semi-finals are just as important as many of the finals that people do.
Yeah.
So it was a massive confidence boost, and I really felt like I'd sort of arrived on the scene that way.
Yeah, that's awesome. And so what I did is I went through in the description and in the YouTube and in the Facebook event is I added, this is one of the few matches that you can get in like full live stream glory on the FIH YouTube page. So I would really encourage everybody to go have a watch of this game, because actually it was a better game than the final. I mean, the final was a very cerebral hockey game, but it wasn't as action-packed, and it was a lot more cagey. This game was just pell-mell back and forth, tons of space on the pitch, and incredible tackles and great plays, and then, mistakes in the circle leading to deflection goals and things like that. And I think it had so much into it. And so we're going to go through a couple clips, not too many, unfortunately, but because I could do this all day. I could be like, okay, let's talk about this one. Let's talk about this one. And like, I did pull out like 10 clips, Dan, but we're only going to go through like 4, I think. But so let's see if I can go to a couple ones. So one of the things that you wanted to talk about was in the first quarter, you had some obstructions that you pulled out here. And this was an example that I found that was really interesting. And the commentator, so it was Rick Charlesworth, was doing color. I don't know if you remember that.
Yeah, I do. I can remember exactly what his commentary was.
Yeah.
To shield the ball.
I think we had a couple of incidents sort of in the first quarter here where we had a few obstructions just on the edge of the circle here, particularly with Dutch trying to get into the circle. And what we get at top level is it's so difficult to get in the circle sometimes that defenders work to that line. And here, I think Rick totally disagrees with me, but I think the stick block is one of those. It's one of those really difficult ones that those who've got a feel for the game can sort of see when it's coming natural. And those who haven't played and seen it, it's a really difficult one. And even the players sometimes they're a little bit confused about whether they're moving the ball, if that's allowed to be a stick block, or where they're dangling the stick. And this one's I think it's a really good, interesting clip because it's not quite clear. And I think Rick kind of disagrees with me, I think, on his commentary.
Yeah.
But I think if you watch it again, I think when he pulls it to the right, back across, he sort of leaves his stick dangling and he's not moving the ball. Okay, he's just trying to float it through that space where that defender's going for a flat stick. And I think it's a really difficult one to spot, but he's just leaving it. He's just leaving to push that stick out of the way so he can enter the circle.
Yeah, right at that moment there.
That's the idea we need to think about, really.
Yep, exactly. And I mean, I talk about this all the time on when I'm trying to describe technique to get your best decisions on obstructions, and it can get really deceiving if you're too ball focused and you're watching the ball. And actually, if you watch that defender and the fact that he's got a really good position and he's got his stick down and flat, and why is it that suddenly there's a stick in the way of him and the ball, but the ball isn't moving in any direction at that particular moment? And I think it's Ware there who's ready to put the tackle in there, number 3, and it's right at this moment that I freeze it, that he does move it to the left after that, but not but the block comes there and then he gets free, and that's why he's able to get that extra space. So I thought that was a really good pick and a tough one, and I think Dr. Charlesworth was just looking he was looking at the body, he wasn't looking at the sticks. So that's fair. If he was a better umpire, maybe he would have been an umpire instead of, a championship coach. Who knows? There you go. There you go. Here was another one that I picked out that wasn't too hard, but seemed to be some confusion from the players at least.
He gets knocked over, no doubt.
Yeah, again, I think it's the sort of idea that I was saying. We had a bit of a theme of sort of obstruction type incidents just on the edge of the circle that were occurring, and this is the Dutch trying to win the ball, and here it's just a bit over aggressive with the physical nature in terms of trying to win that. He loses control over it. It's a really good stick tackle that he's got in there and control, and you just can't nudge him off the ball. And I think part of it, because the ball moves away from that space, is why we get the confusion about the players. So the ball's moving to somebody else, and not everybody would have seen that extra nudge that was given to that player.
Yeah, absolutely. And is it DeVogue? I can't remember what his name is, but the attacker with the possession of the ball at the moment that you blew the whistle, he was just perplexed. And this happens all the time where something happens really quickly with the ball and the wrong person has it when you blow the foul, and that player is saying, "What the hell? What did I do?" And you're like, "No, not you. Not you, this guy." Yeah. And, did you have a little communication just to indicate, like, yeah, cool, it was actually Kroon?
I think a little bit of communication there, and just in terms of, look, it's not you that was on the contact. His head's clearly focused on that ball, and he's probably not seen out of his shoulder that he's a teammate who's nudged him. Yeah,
absolutely. So here was another one here that I picked out from the first quarter. And a nice, really quick whistle. And again, you're explaining obstruction. Preußer loved the call, as we can tell.
As defenders do. Yeah, again, we have to be careful here because there are moments when defenders do commit fouls just on the line or just outside the line because they're trying to play that space. And they're very clever they know that they've got to get their feet outside that area so that if it does contact them, they're going to give away a penalty corner. And it is the prime place for them to try break the game down if they can. Yeah. But here you can see he's made a really good contact on that ball with a stick, and it's the backing in almost as he comes through the space. And it may not be that the Dutch player feels that he realizes that the Australian player has taken that ball quite cleanly in the tackle, and it does impact him and knock him backwards, so he can't stay down on that ball and stay in the strong position.
Absolutely. And you can even see that in Preußer's footwork, he actually kind of kicks away Swan's stick there. And that would be something, again, that he wouldn't feel, he wouldn't notice in the process of, keeping his focus on the ball. So that was a really tough one, but I think your whistle timing really helped there. There was no hesitation. You blew it really strong and right away, and that was amazing. That really, I think that really sold the call for me, and hopefully for some of the players, even if Preußer didn't. He wasn't quite on board there. There he goes. Yeah, Barry Hainsworth here is just chiming in that this probably on that last obstruction often happens at club level. Players lose control of the ball and overrun, and they create that obstruction or contact. And whether you call it obstruction, you call it interference, you call it dangerous play, it really doesn't matter. It's just a really good thing to peg there. So you didn't have a lot to do with for management until we got towards more the end of the first quarter. And there was a nice advantage that Martin played out of his end over here. And then the ball's coming towards you. And we got a bit of a chippy little break down there. And I don't know if everybody at home can hear, but you say, don't do that again. And then you take the ball outside the 23. So can you lead us through, at that point in the game, you're thinking that you're going to only give that warning there because this is something that umpires at home really want to understand.
It's a really interesting clip, is this one, and I think it's really about context, and I think you'll probably hear from all sort of international umpires and think that carding is very much about context of the game, and your management and trying to use every skill you've got available to you before you get to those cards that you need. And in this instance, we are in quarter one, so we haven't used our tools in terms of management yet. We've had to communicate players, but we've not had to really set our line really. Of where we're willing to go and where we're not willing to go and what we're allowed to accept and what we're not. And I think that's really important is early on when the players get to that line or something happens that's about to cross that line, you need to jump in there as quick as possible. The term we use is catching the bus. If you don't pick the one that comes is an opportunity for you to come, then a second one will come with you and it'll catch you. And the second bus that comes will be the one for the players to basically take advantage if you haven't spotted it and set your line really clear. Mm-hmm. And in this one, a little bit of context around its semi-final. We know it's going to be a good game. And within tournaments, particularly at this level, the pool games and the group stages, we all go out there to set our stall. We set our stall as a team about what is acceptable, where the line is, in preparation for these big games like semi-finals. So we've done all the hard work in terms of the players understanding where we are, which gives us a little bit of leeway in what we're allowed to accept and what we're not allowed to accept. Yeah. And it's really easy to look at incidents in context around, you could easily give a green card here for a tackle, or you could give a green card for the nudge in the back that's happening off the ball. But actually, in the context of this game, as umpires, we want to create a spectacle. And if we think we've got a tool in our armory that we think will keep every player on the pitch and still keep control of that game, then it's best that we use that as much as we possibly can. And that's because we're not in a situation where we need to make sure that we've set our standard out and we're allowing attractive and creative hockey. And I think it worked for this game because we end up with something that's fantastic as a spectacle for everybody, both in the stadium, where it's fantastic ending, and for those at home who are watching on TV or just watching it back on feature. This is advertising hockey. We want attractive hockey. Yeah. And sometimes sending players off for every minor infringement is not going to create that. So this is a really one about context, about picking that moment. And because it's early in the game, I've got that armory still in me. I'm not constantly boring to say you can't do this. Yeah. I think when we watch it now, you'll see the defender who makes the tackle. He knows what he's doing. He knows his position. He's outside the 25, and he knows there's a free space behind him if he gets round him. So he does need to slow him down. There's an option for him to create a good attacking opportunity if he doesn't. So I could pull up that, and I could give that a warning. But for me, the bigger incident is what's happening off the ball. It's something that I need to manage throughout the game, and I need to make sure that doesn't happen throughout the game anymore, because with these two teams, we could end up with big incidents in a semi-final knockout game where we could end up with 22 players almost in and around the circle. Yeah. And in those close quarter situations, we can't have players who are barging into each other, trying to gain every advantage by using the physical play. So for me, setting my standard out that I don't want anything off the ball is really crucial. And I think if you when you replay the clip again, if people keep their eye on that top of that circle, you'll see that incident again where the defender's really giving him a nudge. So I've taken that opportunity really to pin both of them. And with the communication, they're saying, "You're not doing that again." I am actually shouting that as loud as I possibly can so that every defender can hear me.
Right.
So that they know that's where the line is.
Dawson tries to stop him.
Oh, it was that there. Okay, I didn't even see that. And that's what you're saying, don't do that again. Ah.
Yeah, but I've got my mind on both of them. So I can see both. I know that I have to deal with both the tackle and what's going on at the very top of the circle. So this is a key one for communication, really, is there's variations of communication. You can use your whistle, you can use your mouth, you can use all sorts of things, but sometimes you can get a good outcome out of two incidents without making it blow up to be huge, but everybody recognizes that you've spotted what's going on.
Yeah.
And that was a key one for me. I actually felt like it was really communicated really well, and he didn't over egg the situation and make a big deal out of something, or create something quite huge for a spectator that put me in the spotlight. But everybody on the pitch knew that I'd seen it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a really good point to make, because we talk a lot about, getting the first one and getting that intervention in there, but the intervention doesn't have to be a card all the time. It doesn't have to be the big penalty. Sometimes your intervention is about that communication, especially early in a game. That's a great time to be really, to let them know where your lines are, and that's where it is, and that you're seeing things, and don't make me deal with it. Like, don't put me in the position where I have to make those decisions, players, because I don't want to be sending you off the pitch. I want you guys to decide this game. So yeah, I really like that. I think that's great. But the next clip, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think it's really important to understand that if that's the sort of the end of the first half, then it may have a completely different outcome. We've probably gone past the warning stage, and players are not going to heed those warnings if we played half the game. So it's all about the timing, and it really depends on what's happened before. So I don't think we've had anything major that we've ever even had to discuss beforehand this. So it's about picking that one that you think is going to really, really set you, that you are there, that you're confident, you've got your eye on everything, and making the players, as I said before, aware that you are looking at everything and you're recognizing it.
Yeah, super important. The next clip I want to show, you actually don't appear in it anywhere. And that is the most amazing part to me. So I don't know if you managed to look at this before we started, but this is a penalty corner down Martin's end, and an amazing save from Block. And then there's a break, like the ball breaks from the middle of the pitch. And they are going pell-mell, okay? And here comes Hertzberger, and they're in the circle. He earns a corner, and you're there, okay? Can you please explain to us how this happened? Because I have no idea how you managed to, when did you leave in order to be ahead of this play? Because that is insane. Every one of the rest of us would have been back at the center line calling that corner.
To be fair, I've probably edged a little bit when I've realised the first shot's not gone in perfect, and there's a bigger chance of that thing. But I must admit, I'd been working on positioning for a good year and a half, 2 years before the World Cup. I think we've seen a massive change in the game internationally since we added in the self pass, and since the aerial ball. Really, the Belgians have been the ones who've sort of pushed the game forward with the aerial ball. But the game is travelling so fast now that we've had to readjust our positioning, and we've got to almost sit a little bit deeper than we would normally do. So that anticipation and understanding of when something may happen. My view is always I need to be in the circle and I need to be stood still as much as possible when I see a big decision, because it gives me the best opportunity to be in the right position and my eyes to be looking in the right place and not be distracted by anything or any movements that could cause me to be in this scenario. So I'd been working on the positioning side of it for a year and a half, 2 years, and I've been working on finding what was best for me to be as deep as possible, but also to be selling the decisions in the middle of the park. And we tried a few things out, and I think usually, if we take the European style of positioning that used to be very much you run from your baseline, you curve around, and you stick to your sideline. And I've very much changed that idea of trying to be as inside the pitch as possible and cut the angles down as quick as I possibly can. So instead of taking the long run round, trying to get as fast as I possibly can to the danger area, and the danger area for me is a circle.
Yes.
So backtracking as quick as I can and then cutting in as fast as I can. So I'm shortening my distance where I could be. So the positioning thing is something that I've been working on for a really long period of time. it's a difficult one. I wouldn't say I've won everybody over with my positioning. I think sometimes people think I'm a little bit too deep. And there's sort of vague areas where sort of down this sideline around the halfway line where people might say you might be sacrificing those decisions because you're not quite coming up that sideline, you're staying more inside. But for me, it's a better balanced judgment that I'm not sacrificing. I can still see them.
Yeah.
But for me, the biggest decision, and the reason we brought about this new position change is we'd done a bit of analysis within England, to be fair, on the video umpiring decisions of where they were coming about in the circle. And we were finding a lot of the ones that were making mistakes were either at the back post or were sort of on the right-hand side. And a lot of it was from attacking play. So it wasn't crowded circles, really. It was just that we were not getting into the position in the circle as early as possible. We were still too wide on the circle position. So we had a bit of a mess around, and I found that after 5 or 6 games, things were working. There were odd things that I needed to tweak. I wasn't reading things particularly well in certain positions, but we spotted that. And I just adapted and changed. So it was a big change that has got me to that point. But I prefer to be as deep as possible, just so I know I'm there for that high striker. If that ball quickly gets in there or as a fast aerial that's thrown over the top, I'm always in the position stood there ready to see it. That's the idea.
Yeah, absolutely. Baz, come on, man. This is amazing, Dan. I honestly, like, you literally just presented my positioning workshop. Like, everything you said is like slide for slide. The first 10 slides of why do we do this and what are we aiming for and what are the strengths and strengths and risks and things like that of this new positioning. But this was something, I'm so glad you went with this, because I pulled this little segment out because it's a very fine point that not a lot of people notice. But what I see here is you holding this interior positioning, because you see the threat of the turnovers and the fact that the ball is very likely to come back into your mission critical area. And instead of making yourself work really, really hard and cross the train tracks a whole bunch of times by running around the flag and then trying to come up your sideline, you're holding inside until you have to come outside because the congestion's there. And I think that's something that could be a really big benefit and a great skill for umpires to add, rather than thinking, oh my God, I got to be outside and doing that old school, as you called it, the old school traditional European positioning and holding there, because that's why you're able to be there to make this set of decisions here in the circle. And then, you're moving. It's not that you're staying still, but you can have that interior angle to see the things that you need to see on the sideline until the ball moves in a certain way. And
yeah, I think us as umpires, we have to think what's the worst case scenario that could happen here. We can predict as much as we want what we expect to happen, but what's the worst case scenario? And for me, the worst case scenario here is that they turn over the ball and the next big decision happens right on a P spot or on the back post, and I'm going to have to sell a massive decision, and I'm still running into the circle, trying to get my head around where I am. And if I'm running, then I'm not in a stable position to see everything. There's a good chance I might miss it, or I might misread it in some way. Yeah. And also, if I'm running, I can't quite make those adjustments if there's other players in the way. It just doesn't sell the decision really well. Yeah. So for me, it's thinking about what the worst case scenario is, and the worst case scenario is that defender loses that ball straight away and it's pinged straight into the circle. So if I'm on the inside and I can be in a good enough position to be as close as possible to that one, the foot or the sideline on the sideline, there's a chance I might misread it, but I will naturally get a feel from the players about whether I missed that, or whether something's happened. Whereas in the circle, I'm going to be making a video call and all eyes are on me if I've made that mistake. And we know too well now that the video scenario can be one that can be counted up against us in tournaments. It can be one that can sort of push sort of suggestions into players that there's a weakness there. So trying to limit those options, we know we're going to make mistakes. There's going to be times where we do it. So accepting that, but limiting the number that we can possibly get wrong in those key areas is really crucial.
Yeah. You're not looking to rely on video to bail you out all the time. You're trying to minimize the amount of times that's even going to need to go, particularly if a team has perhaps made a rash decision to challenge something that they really had no business challenging, and suddenly they don't have a referral, and you have a situation in your circle where, boy, it would have been really nice if you could have had that extra look, but you can't self-refer unless it's a stroke or a goal, and you don't have a choice. And that that ability to go upstairs has been taken away just because they gave their referral away earlier. So yeah, it's definitely not a crutch. It's an additional tool, and it's a really great tool for you to have. But I think
transfers massively to the lower leagues as well, because you take out the video scenario and all those people are up and coming or are working at a level where we don't have that technology, we don't have that thing. On our weekly basis, if we're doing domestic leagues and you don't have that available, you've got to be there. You can't rely on somebody else to get that one right. So we've got to be on that big spot. And if we're going to be there in that right position at the right time in domestically without that video, then you're going to be in the right place where you need to be. Yeah,
absolutely. Okay, 2 more clips. I'm having to make executive decisions. This is the stuff that we want to cover. And the last one's going to be the aerial, the one that everybody has been talking about on social media. But this one I want to pick out because this is the first green card of the game. And I think a lot of people might wonder what was happening that went, why Martin went with a green card here. So I'm sure you saw it the same way that he did. So we're not telling tales out of school, but what do you see here, and how can you explain to people at home why this scenario should be a green card here?
Yeah, it's not something I'd say you do every time. And I think people might automatically, I think we've gone through a stage now where we've automatically said going to ground is a yellow card, and each one is. And I think when you get a feel for the game again and context here, this particular one, yes, he goes to ground, yes, he makes a stick tackle. And yes, eventually the Australian player does lose contact to the ball. But if we look at the context, he's going forward. He's not really creating that game-breaking scenario at the moment.
Yeah.
So that tackle, whilst in nature it needs dealing with and showing that you recognise it as a player, and the players recognise that he's gone to ground, it's a bad tackle, it needs punishment. But it's not game influential. And I think here we've got a scenario where there's no danger physically to the Australian. He's not knocked off balance that much that it's going to hurt him or get injured. Eventually he loses the ball and eventually he dives himself, I think. Yeah. But I think what's best for the outcome for the game, and I think a 5-minute yellow is a massive game changer in a semi-final like this. Right. And actually sitting him down for 2 minutes where he can come back on very quickly, he knows he's done something wrong, is probably a better impact. But again, that's about feel. And I think you have to be careful if you're coming through the ranks and people are automatically say that has to be yellow. The one that we discussed in clips all the time. But again, it's about feel, and there's something that we're lucky that at the top of the game we can do is we can slightly adapt it, and players accept that in many ways. But it's about outcome, and he's not stopping anything major here, and he's not brought him down and done something nasty. So a green card, I think, was totally accepted by everybody on the pitch, and we carry on.
Absolutely. And I think that distinguishing factor, I mean, we talk about players going to ground, but players can go to ground all they want. They just can't take somebody else to ground with them in the action, because that's the danger we're trying to eliminate. We don't want players getting tripped up and taken to ground by these rash challenges. So in that case, there was, I think actually it was almost like the defenders, I think it was Virga's arm that actually kind of tripped up because he was down on the ground and kind of tripped the ball carrier with his foot and that sort of thing. But the ball carrier didn't go to ground, not until later, and he kind of stumbled. So like you said, it wasn't that super dangerous situation that should attract that automatic yellow card. So I think, you want to take all those things into account, as well as what you were saying, what effect did it have on the game? Is the deterrent value still there, and all that kind of stuff? So thanks for leading us through that. That's really important. And now we're ready for the big call. This is the one. And it's amazing. So when the play first happened back in 2018, I put something on social media about it and got a lot of people who disagreed with me. And ever since then, ever so often, one of those big Instagram accounts will dredge it up from somewhere, and they'll bring out the aerial. So setting the stage here, we are 30 seconds left in the game, and Australia's down a goal. Fling the aerial, and Ockenden makes an interception. They play it on, and this happens. Charlie Broom's losing his mind.
The ball comes down there.
But this is the angle that people need to see that is never on social media. That's the angle. And that's the angle you would have seen, right?
Yeah. It's a really interesting topic, this one, and I think well, the aerial ball is one that every umpire talks about, isn't it, on a regular basis? It's the one that I think even players accept that is the biggest grey area in our umpiring tools and rules and regulations. And I think I might get in trouble for saying that, calling it new, but we've kind of gone to the World Cup with sort of like a newish interpretation about how we were going to deal with the aerials. It wasn't massively new. It wasn't something that was completely different. But we'd had a long discussion, a long understanding about how we were going to blow it and what we were going to allow it. And the main thing that came into play in our discussions was about danger. Mm-hmm. We want attractive hockey. We want things to be creative, to be exciting. And if we blow that, it's 2-1 and we don't get this fantastic end to the game. And yet no danger has been created in the play. You can see the Dutch player is definitely underneath the ball, ready to receive that. But the Australian player is totally safe in coming into that space to intercept that. And we want a scenario where we can create attacking hockey that's safe. We want to allow people to play the ball in the air with skill level. Yeah. We've seen a massive game change, and I alluded to earlier about the Belgians who kind of adapted their game to play a lot of their game in the air whereas possible. Yeah. And they've worked out that in the rules and regulations, whereas it used to be that 5 meter space, if I throw an aerial ball to somebody who's stood in that 5 meter space, nobody can come in to get it and get it. And if anybody does, then they'll be penalised. And it just meant that the game could go from an aerial ball into the circle to somebody in space. We'd have a penalty corner straight away. And defenders were not able to defend the game. The Belgians were getting really good at throwing the aerial balls from one circle to the other circle without anybody being able to interfere. And that has a negative effect on how we play the game in many ways. And what we want is creating attacking hockey. And here you can see it's all about safety. And we need to think about now about how we interpret the aerial ball. And we can recognise that if he comes within 1-2 meters and he's very close, then we blow it early. We blow it as danger. We sort it out. And that by all means, that would be a Dutch free hit. But in this instance, he's taking the ball to a new space. He's in clear space in front of him, and there's never going to be any contact. So this is something that we want to encourage to be more attractive. Yeah, and I think it's really important to look at this play from that vertical angle, because when you look at it from the side, it's deceptive. You're in line with the ball and everything that's coming. Let's see if I can freeze it right at the moment. But when you look at it from here, you can see that Akinen is actually probably 5 meters away. He's just 5 meters on the angle instead of being straight. And like you said, this is a completely safe interception because his stick is nowhere near Van Ass there. And so for that to have been blown would have just been, ridiculous. And this is the tension that, we were talking about the making the decision 20 meters before the ball is landed. That's all well and good if it's a static situation. But in a situation like this where it's dynamic and here's a player who can actually use their stick above their shoulder and take it safely, why shouldn't they be able to do that? So I think that's a really good point. And then, you must have just been losing your mind because, the play's flowing towards you. You got seconds left in the game. And suddenly, I'm just seeing if I can get this rolling again, suddenly Australia is scoring the tying goal that goes in off a defender's foot and in between Block's legs and all this sort of stuff. And did they come to you with a team referral or did you take a self-referral here? I took my own. I think I judged already as the play was coming on that when it went in the back of the net, they were already going to come at me. They'd already had a discussion. You can see by the reaction straight away that they thought something was wrong with that aerial. And whilst there was nothing wrong with it, it turns out I just knew that they were going to come at me straight away. It's huge. There's 30 seconds left. It's semi-final, and this is going to go to a draw and a shootout if this goal goes in. Yeah. So I knew they were coming. So I'd already made my mind up in my head that I was going to send this to video referral no matter what. If I could make up something just to look at, just to sort of diffuse the scenario. Because I think if I hadn't, we could have been stood there for 2 minutes discussing that ball on the halfway line about whether that was a foul or not. And it wasn't something on the aerial I could go to the video for because it's outside the 25. So it's non-referable. I just couldn't do it. So we could have had a scenario that could have spoilt the image of the game, really, if we'd have stood there for 2 minutes discussing that. When we'd got the end of the final 30 seconds, which everybody wants to see something attractive. And I think if we played on the clip for even further, you'd realise that it was in my head at the time, and the words for the video referral didn't quite come out of my head as I expected or as I thought I was saying. I think
I clipped that part out for you. I was like, no, I'm just gonna leave that out. You're like, is there any reason not? That's a goal.
Yeah, and I'd already given the goal, and I think in my head I knew it was a goal in my head, and I think I'd phrased the question as, is there any reason why I shouldn't award this? But the shouldn't didn't come out right. I just said should.
Yes.
And that's the pressure situation of 16,000 screaming fans who've just realised that we're going to shoot out in a semi-final, and the pressure that the Dutch players coming towards me, and me wanting to sting that as soon as possible, so that the cameras didn't see those players having those conversations with me.
Yep.
And whilst the words came out wrong, I'm actually quite proud about the fact that we managed to get that over with, get onto camera, and it didn't come across on TV as anything that was going on outside of the scenario that there was any communication.
Yeah, and that's a fantastic point, and something that we got to take home as well for our leagues is that when you make a big contentious call like that, there's absolutely nothing wrong with you stopping time. Hey, I already know what you're going to ask. Let me go talk to my colleague and make sure we're going to get this right. And then to go back to the captains or whoever the leaders are and say, look, we talked it over. This is what we saw. And, confirm or reverse your decision if you need be. But there's a way you can preempt that explosion of temper towards you and present a more tidy game. So that's a really good point that I like that. Simon's asking who was in the video box. It was Gregory Utenhoven, and he did a really good job translating what you said.
Yeah,
he was just sort of sitting there going, okay, any reason that you shouldn't award the goal? he was so cute. He did a very good job there. He did a very good, he didn't have that many referrals. I think it only went up to him like 3 times in the game, and one was in the shootout. We're not going to talk about that one because that's hilarious.
Okay. I think it was funny on the commentary because I think Rick said to me that I think he commentated on the thing that the pressure's got to him in what he said, and I think he did get to me. That's why. But you already know how that's going to feel like until you've been in those scenarios a few times. I can't
even imagine, Dan, like for sure. So Raj is asking, out of interest, what feedback did you get from the UMs? If you can, about the aerial, or did you not discuss it at all? I'm sure you talked about it after the game.
We didn't really talk about too much actually, because I think we were really pleased about it. So we were just really pleased about how the game went. So it was more just a fist bump and maybe have a beer after the game just to say, good job, lads, well done. This is a huge game that has gone without any major controversy and has ended in such a fantastic way.
Yeah.
But I think afterwards, generally, it's been accepted, particularly on the international side, that it was spot on. That's how we want the game to be umpired in the future. That was the interpretation we were looking for, and that was the moment that kind of is being used in future to look at as a way that we're going to officiate aerial balls moving forward, and allowing those interceptions where safe.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, we've been having conversations a lot, and I mean, between a Really Tuesday here and a What Up Wednesday and, all that kind of thing. I've been trying to also share those ideas with everybody at home that we really are trying to move to a more fluid way of dealing with those aerial ball situations. It makes it more difficult, admittedly, for everybody at other levels. But again, it's a skill that you are seeing more and expressed in that way with those angular balls and the ones that are getting released on the full run and things like that make those hard decisions, that create the situation for those harder decisions. You're seeing that more at the higher levels anyway. So you don't see your typical 16-year-old player being able to toss that kind of aerial the way that whoever it was.
And I think the really important thing, particularly for those who are up and coming and are umpiring at lower leagues, I think we talk about the 20-meter area and about judging where we are. The most important thing is we're not tracking that ball in the air. Our eyes are firmly focused on that landing point. So the movement of those players and seeing who's going to be underneath it and what the potential is the most important bit. Yeah. And the least important thing is looking at where that ball is and what the space is happening above you, because that's not going to be where your decision is going to be.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think it's the aerial ball, the difficulty of it is, and one of the reasons why this clip has been shared so much is it's so difficult to get clips from it, because everybody's in different positions at different times, and getting a clear understanding about what we want and what we don't want is a hard one to do.
Yeah.
And this is just obviously one big moment that was really clear and ended in a fantastic result.
Yeah, absolutely. I complain all the time when I'm trying to clip aerials for use in workshops or anything like that, or in the library, that because everything's the huge majority of coverage is presented from that side on camera, and it's tracking the ball. So by the time the ball is near the landing point, you have no idea where the players had started out. You have no idea who has created what. And this happens all the time on social media. Somebody will put up a clip of an aerial and it's going towards the circle and it gets tipped over the goalkeeper and everybody's like, what do you mean? The two players were there together. That's dangerous. And it should be blown free out. But we have no idea where the players were at any point of that ball's trajectory. So it's really tough to train that skill as well. And so one of the pieces of advice I give to umpires is don't watch the game from the sideline. Watch a game where there's going to be arrows thrown from behind the goal. And that is ideally where you're going to be working on getting your positioning to, just like you've been working on, Dan, for the last few years. And that helps you develop that vision of, not looking the ball in the air, but seeing where it's going before it gets there. And then making your decisions as to who an initial receiver is, who could intercept safely, and all that kind of stuff. So those are really, really good points for sure. And, there you go. Well, you know what? I'm seeing a lot of people in the comments now. They're pinching out. They're like, "Yep, this has been even more than a Keeley hour." Inga is saying, "Thank you very much. It was a great session." Simon Begg, thank you so much to Dan, and of course me for everything. Yeah, it was really great. Simon, thank you, thank you, thank you. It was really great to have you all on at home, because your questions and your input really help make these sessions awesome. But Dan, thank you so much for all this time. It was a really great conversation. You are, you talk about how you like to take breaks from hockey brain, and you're not maybe as obsessive as I am, but man, when you get talking, you are right in there and have no problems. So, and also I'm going to get on you later and see if you want to co-present my positioning workshop with me, because I'd love to have you sell those concepts with me, because I say them and people are like, Keeley, I think you might be on drugs. And I'm like, no, trust me, this is happening. Umpires are doing this and it's really good. So thank you for sharing all that, your wisdom, your experience, and everything. And, let's get you back on in the future when you've had more different tournaments under your belt and more things to share. It'll be awesome. It'll be awesome.
Well, means.
Yeah. Thanks, Raj, for all your questions. Where did Baz go? I was expecting banter, and he just
probably nipped for a pint of Yorkshire beer.
Exactly, that he has. You're very welcome, Gary and Barry. Awesome. Oh, there he is. Essay's haircut looks good, he says. There you go. There's the banter we were looking for. Thanks a lot, Dan, and we will see everybody again very soon next week. What Up Wednesday, same time, same place, and same YouTube. Thanks, everybody. Bye for now.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Dan.